All right, so it's a breezy fall, almost winter day. It's gorgeous again. The skies are blue, the trees are turning, and the little leaves are whipping up around. And what do we have here? This is our little flaming hot 1969 Subaru 360. And I've got a little story to tell you. I was out driving around a couple weeks ago when I filmed the last video on this car. Picked up my daughter from soccer practice, and we were heading through a pretty densely populated neighborhood, and there was a dog like my shop dog, except it was a Labradoodle, and a little boy was chasing the dog, and the dog ran out in the street, and I hit the dog with the car. Of course, I jammed on my brakes, and that's why the car's here, is the brakes don't normally get jammed on that hard, and they stuck. Luckily, the dog was not hurt. He seemed to trot off, as well as the little boy. Did do a little damage to the car, though. You can see there's a big old chip right there. I'm not complaining. The dog just sort of bounced off the bumper. 35 to 50 pound dog probably could have done some damage to this thing, but it all happened so quickly, as most people say. So as the car sits, the rear wheels are locked because both the rear wheel cylinders pushed out the pistons further than they normally go, and I can't get them to retract in an easy way. So that's one way to exercise your brakes. So let's get this thing in the shop, and I'll show you the conversion trick we're going to do with replacing the wheel cylinders on this little Subaru 360. And we won't hit any dogs going into the shop, will we, Stella? Maybe a squirrel. Would you like a squirrel? Oh yeah, you would. All right, so we've got our little Subaru 360 sedan with the flame job in the shop, and we're going to do a little brake tutorial. And I just wanted to re-emphasize that the dog we hit while we jammed our brakes on and overextended our pistons in the rear wheels was not hurt. So I did mention there was a little bit of damage, but that can be fixed. I'm glad that the little boy's dog ran off. I actually don't know what happened, because we jammed on our brakes and the car stopped, and then I couldn't get it rolling again because the wheels had locked up from the brakes jamming. After a while they sort of released and we were able to drive home, but I know the rear brakes are now sticking because of that. So I want to show the master cylinder, and this is a great tip for you Subaru 360 enthusiasts. Subaru 360 wheel cylinders or master cylinders are really hard to get. This is a Wilwood street rod master cylinder, and if you look closely, it is a .625. That's 5/8. Now, this is the master cylinder that's in this car, and I've had it in there for 10 years. It works great. If you don't know, the smaller the bore of the master cylinder, the more assist you get. This is a .625, and it's going to go on another car, which I'm going to do conversion on here shortly, and I'll show you how that works. But this car actually has a .75, which is a 3/4 in it, and the brake feel is good. Doesn't feel like power brakes, but I'm going to show you how it's mounted. It takes a little bit of fabrication to get in there. You got to make a bracket, and you got to adapt all the lines. So let's get our light in there so you can see it. You see the master cylinder in there? I had to make a bracket that's sort of an L-shaped and attach the brake light switch to make it all function, and then there's superthane there for the brake fluid remote reservoir line, and then it hooks up to there's like a trunnion there of brake lines that go to the car. You see that like that? Oh, my light's not so good. So it works really well. It's a nice compact master cylinder. You can see how it fits. Darn, I wish my light would cooperate with me. How it fits in there. If it was any longer, it wouldn't fit. It's a direct replacement for a Subaru 360 master cylinder if you cannot find one, and they're hard to find. Like I said, you got to do some adaptation. So that is the master cylinder adaptation that we're going to look at today. Now we're going to move on to the wheel cylinders. Let's see if I can get myself out of here. Such a great little car. I can't wait to get the wheels unstuck. I don't know if I made myself clear, but I want to just reiterate that on the Wilwood master cylinders that you can buy, the black fitting here is a fitting that I adapted. This is where the inlet is. That's where the fluid comes in from the remote reservoir, and the fitting here, where I'm touching my finger, is the outlet. In other words, that's the pressure that would go to your brake system. These come in 3 different sizes, I believe, like a .625, a .75, and there's one larger, a 13/16 or a 1 inch, I'm not sure. And they're all sized the same physically, but the bores are bigger. Again, the bigger the bore, the more pedal pressure you have. You're pushing more fluid at a lower rate. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so we're working on a little Subaru project here. You can see I've got the wheel and the drum off together. If that doesn't happen for you, you can undo the rim nuts here, the outer rim nuts, and then use a factory puller like this one to pull the wheel off. These rear brake drums that are aluminum have a steel insert and they're splined, and sometimes that spline gets stuck on this spline and you don't want to beat an aluminum drum, so you want to use the puller. So we are looking at our wheel cylinder. This is the side that's really stuck. So I do have some upgrades here. I have stainless steel brake lines that I put on 20 years ago when I did the rear wheel cylinders 20 years ago. These were cast iron, and they are converted Subaru Justy wheel cylinders. I'll show you how to do that. And these are the new ones. They're 3/4 inch, and this seems to be aluminum. We have to drill out the fitting, the flare fitting in there to run a banjo bolt. See if we can get in there to look what we're talking about. See that banjo bolt on there? I'm going to show you how to do that in a second here. But the good news is our shoes are in good shape. There's nothing leaking. It's just we overextended our wheel cylinders on our panic stop there, and that's just no good. These things, cars don't have enough power to overcome stuck brakes. So, all right, follow along. Okay, so we're back. We got the brake line disconnected and it's dripping there into our big bucket. And we got our wheel cylinder off. This is the cast iron wheel cylinder that we're replacing. You can see that the piston is stuck out, and you can see the bolt pattern there. See the double bolt pattern there of this is the original one for the Subaru 360, and this is the one that I re-drilled. Oh, excuse me. This is the one that I re-drilled, the upper one, and this is the original Subaru 360 wheel cylinder. So these are off of an 86 Subaru Justy rear wheel cylinder. They're about $7 a piece. It doesn't even make sense to try to rebuild this. New ones are so cheap. But you do have to drill out the inverted flare. Let me show you that. So this is our new one here. Take the factory plug out. Can you see that flare in there? You got to drill that out because we're going to put a banjo bolt in there. And the best way to do that is to actually invert the wheel cylinder. So drill it upside down. We don't want metal shavings getting into our wheel cylinder. Let's do that next. Try to do this with one hand. I have found that this is about impossible to do one-handed. You take your drill and basically you find the right size bit that fits into the banjo connection, what we're going to use. You don't want to hurt the threads, and you want to do this upside down so it looks something like this. So all the threads come out. I mean, sorry, not the threads. All the machining scraps come out and don't get in your wheel cylinder. Okay, so once you've drilled out your wheel cylinder, you want to check to make sure that when this bolt is in there, there's not a bunch of threads sticking out. It has to clamp. We're changing the sealing surface from the outside here with sealing rings to an inverted flare, or from an inverted flare. So you'll want to make sure that your banjo bolt is seated about this much into the bore. And you can use your handy dandy tap. Just be sure you clean out all your shavings and tap a little further in if you need to. Okay, so we got the wheel cylinder back on and stopped our brake fluid from hemorrhaging all over the place. But I noticed my e-brake cable was a little seized, so I took the shoe pack off. It comes off in a big cluster all together there, and I squirted oil into my e-brake here and all along the housing, which over time has exposed the cable, and I'm just going to pull back and forth, get that e-brake cable lubed up. I loosened up the front too so I could do this, and it seems like it's coming, which is great. I did not want to put the brakes back together and have the e-brake cause the same problem as my wheel cylinder sticking. All right, and then you repeat all those steps for the opposite side, and if you're really good, you'll have done it fast enough that you have not drained the reservoir. Now we got a little bit left, so we're doing all right. If you drain the reservoir, the master cylinder goes dry, and then you got to bleed it all, and that takes a long time. All right, so we're finishing up on our Subaru 360 rear wheel cylinder project, and a couple things I got to give you some tips on. If you notice, the brake drums here are aluminum. Let me turn my light off because I think you can see better without it. They're aluminum brake drums, but they have holes in them. These holes here are for looking through as a sight window to see how close the shoe is to the drum. If you look through there, I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, you probably can't. The shoe is contacting the drum. So if it wasn't, you would use this round hole here, line it up with the star wheel adjuster, and basically just crank it down until you see the shoe contact the drum. You don't want any preload on this thing. It needs to have good rolling resistance. So once you've got your shoes adjusted in the back, you'll make your way around Shop Dog to the other side. Do the same thing here. You look through the sight hole and you see right here, you can kind of spin it along the length of the shoe. Make sure that shoe is contacting the drum just ever so slightly. If it isn't, use your star wheel adjuster through here that you've loosened up and make sure that works good. And then you get to bleeding. Since the Subaru 360 is a single line system, you have to bleed the fronts as well as the back. And before you do that, before you do anything, you need to make sure that the brake fluid reservoir is full. If you run that dry at any point during this process, you risk making the master cylinder go dry, which then you have to bleed on the car, and it takes a lot of fluid. So the simple way of doing this, like on the front, is you would just loosen up. This is how I one-man bleed. You loosen up your bleeder screw and you run the hose up. It's crucial you have to run the hose up. Air goes up. So up and over the tire, and you simply go into the car and you watch your hose here while you pump the pedal. So I've got my right hand pumping the pedal, and you don't want to pump it to get air in the line. Just see how I'm pumping it just slightly, just a little bit like that. And as you do that, you watch your line. See that air bubble? He's gone. Let's see if there's any more. You just do that around all four wheels. And sometimes it's hard to get this line in a spot where you can see it from inside the car, but that's what you do. All right. And then once you get all four done, you should probably put it on the road and take it for a test drive. Let's see if that can happen. One thing about Subaru 360s, if you're not aware, is the speedometer is driven off of the driver's front wheel. If you look, this looks like a little tuning fork. I don't know if that'll focus in, but this dust cover engages with the speedometer cable within the hub. Once you kind of find it, wiggle it, it goes right in. Make a liar out of me. It's supposed to sink in there all the way. But you kind of wiggle that, and then there it goes. And you find the right position, and then you put the screws in. It's pretty cool. There's no speedometer cable driven off the transmission. All right, so we're finishing up on our service on our little Subaru 360. We have a full brake fluid reservoir. We have a brake pedal that is now firm, although it's not quite as firm. Where is it? Right here, it's this one. It's got some modulation. Before it was rock hard because the rear wheel cylinders were effectively seized. They would go out, but they wouldn't retract. So try that out. That's going to feel a little different. Again, this car is equipped with the, it's going to be hard to see in there because my light on, the Willwood master cylinder upgrade, which I talked about in depth a little before. I went ahead and I repacked my front wheel bearings, and the star wheel adjusters on the front wheels were a little sticky, so I got those working. And now all the wheels spin free, nothing's locked up, and Also adjusted the e-brake, which is this cable right under the car. Right here, there's a turnbuckle. You turn it one way, and it basically pulls these two cables together, or you turn it the other way, and it lengthens them. This is a solid rod, which then goes to a trunnion here for the e-brake cable. So I've got the rear lock nuts, the castle nuts. I got to put some cotter pins in that. Got our rear brakes adjusted the way they should be. We're ready to put her down and take her for a drive. What do you think, Stella? You want to go for a drive? You do? Give me a little eyebrow wink. Oh, there you go.